Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello and welcome once again to GammaCast. I'm your host Charlie Esser, and with me once again is
Phil Parrish.
Phil, great to have you. Tonight's episode is The Quiet Room. David Balin is working as an orderly, actually he's an attendant, at Valley View Sanitarium after discovering that a surgeon is using experimental mind control. He unwillingly becomes a patient himself. Director on this is Reza Badi,
Mm-hmm.
who I know we've had before. Reza Badi. Oh wow, he was born in 1929. Man, just takes you back. Popular director on a lot of shows throughout history. But here's actually one thing I wanted to touch base on. Our writers on this show, aside from the ubiquitous Kenneth Johnson, include Karen Harris and Jill Donner. Now, Jill Donner did 38 episodes of The Incredible Hulk, and Karen Harris did 12. And I found it very fascinating because, of course, you see these writers continually coming back, continually working. They certainly were Jill Donner definitely was in the writing room. She was definitely an ongoing member of the team. And again, this is an episode where we do have it's hard to describe her as a strong female lead, but a prominent female character in this episode in Dr. Joyce Hill. Again, a doctor, not a nurse, but a full member of the staff. We also see our first miracle patient is, of course, a female. Mm-hmm. Kathy Allen, played by CN Barbara Allen. So to give us our little breakdown of the show, basically David has gotten work at a mental hospital. Now this is interesting to me because this episode has the very feeling of a working towards a cure.
Mm-hmm.
But there's never really a mention that David is working towards a cure in this episode. Did you notice that, Phil?
Yeah, it was kind of weird unless he had heard rumors of this doctor's miracle treatment without knowing the details. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he just thought changing his mental state could, I don't know.
Well, and again, like I said, this is an interesting, it's almost kind of an overarching theme so far this season. This is our third episode dealing with mental illness. Mm-hmm. In which the mental and actually I believe Jill Donner worked on Haunted as well. So this is a and it's interesting because again this is an episode where I feel it's interesting because here's my thing. I look at this episode. I look at the previous two episodes. Haunted and what was the last episode? With the Hemingway gentleman.
No, was it No Escape?
No Escape.
Yeah.
So you look at Haunted, No Escape, and now this episode, and you really have what I think is almost an ongoing debate about the state of mental health care in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, which of course winds up becoming a surprisingly defining feature of the 80s, even though people didn't notice it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
because, of course, this debate on mental health feeds into the politics of the day, both in the humanization of the mentally ill, as well as you had this weird convolution of this urge towards deinstitutionalization and this urge towards a cutting of funding for institutions, and basically how both noble ideas led to a much more negative outcome. Um, but we don't need to talk politics on GammaCast. But it is interesting to see how this very much was in the zeitgeist in 1979, and of course our original air date on this was May 11th, 1979. So almost halfway through the year, almost to the 80s, folks. We're getting there. The 80s reboot will soon be about the 80s. Trust me. And of course, this is a Sans Jack McGee episode, which, I guess is understandable. We have had some very Jack McGee centric episodes recently. And at times, I do understand that they need to move away from Jack McGee, but he is a missed presence here. It's always an interesting question to me, and I get the feeling the writers never thought deep enough about Jack McGee's actual beat at the register. He does seem to be the science reporter, and does because the first time he's pursuing a separate story, he's dealing with Banner, then he's dealing with the nuclear reactor. The third time where he really seems to be pursuing a story other than the Hulk, it is with the doctor who let someone die on her table. So that does seem to be his beat, and so this seemed like it would be a perfect place for Jack McGee to show up, but he doesn't. So to give the basic plot here, basically David is at the mental institution. We are not given a reason for him being there. It could very well be that he's researching a cure, or it could be that this was a job that was available.
And
yes.
Sorry, I was going to say, like the logical reason why Jack McGee probably wasn't there is because like even the first Hulk out was only witnessed, of course, luckily by some of the patients who, people could have written off as an hallucination. So yeah, the Hulk really wasn't seen in public till the end.
And they actively do that. They actively do that. Yeah. So no, I mean, it perfectly made sense why Jack McGee's not there. Although, like I said, I think you could have written in a Jack McGee on in this idea that he is researching this miracle cure. Because of course that is our first introduction to this, and why and like I said, it seems like an episode where there is this quest for the cure, and yet no real effort is ever made by David to find this cure. Because of course what we see very, very early on in the story, we see CN Barbara Allen playing Kathy Allen, who has wandered out of her room and she smashes the TV. And she's getting into fights with people, very unladylike behavior. And we see that she gets prepped for this surgery, which is, again, a very interesting take on this to refer to surgery as the cure. And then all of a sudden she's just a normal suburban mom. And I felt that was very interesting on a number of levels. Again, as we said, I had said that No Escape was kind of an answer, perhaps, to the criticisms that may have been leveled at Haunted about their treatment of mental illness in Haunted, and that was a much more direct treatment of mental illness, and of course a mental illness that was cured via brain surgery. This episode, we have, again, this quick cure by surgery, although by the end of the episode, we are led to believe that the cure did not work as well as the doctor had imagined.
No, wasn't it? It was basically just mind control, basically, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, basically, yeah. Well, I mean, and they never really go into how he does it.
Mm-hmm.
What was a little annoying is that at the very end of the episode, we do see Ms. Kelly back, and she does mention that they were able to reverse the procedure, which I can't even comprehend what that means.
Yeah, because
But it
it's
also, yeah.
what procedure? Because she didn't seem to have any like scars on her head or anything like that.
Well, and for what it's worth, I mean, when you're actually doing a lobotomy, you very rarely would have a scar from a lobotomy of a standard frontal lobe lobotomy because they actually go in through the eye because it's easier to go in through the eye than to try and cut the skull. So it's not so ridiculous that they would have dealt with the patients in a more cognizant way while they were prepping them for surgery. Because for what it's worth, and this is a very interesting aspect of this, I think that we get our first real supervillain in the show in the I believe it's Doctor. Is it Doctor Caldwell or is it Doctor Murrow? I think it's Doctor Caldwell. Or maybe it was
Dr. Morrow.
Dr. Morrow. John Petlock played Dr. Caldwell, and neither of the pictures that they have posted, are particularly useful for determining who is who. Although weirdly enough, I'm looking at Phil Abbott right now. He looks a lot like like Clark Gregg when he was younger.
Hmm?
So that's weird. I don't know why that is, but so essentially what happens is David, because of course he can't keep his nose out of everyone else's business.
Mhm.
Although what he was really doing there, aside from macking on the female doctor, seems a little suspect. He stumbles upon the fact because the evil doctor, our supervillain doctor, our Dr. Faustus of the episode, is currently performing these MK Ultra experiments on the patients. And of course, the patients can't actively consent and nonsense like that. So basically, when David realizes this, the doctor gives him this whole thing about, well, this brings in money and this is this and this is that. But David, with his moral compass, knows he has to break. He can't just tolerate that.
Mhm.
Which leads us to our I believe our first Hulk out.
After David steals the Betamax tape.
Yeah, Betamax. Hey man, it's high quality digital video, man. That's all I got to tell. Well, no, but and here's what I wanted to mention about his escape. We had mentioned this last episode about how there seems to be this effort to increase the idea of superhumanity within the Hulk.
Mhm.
And in this one, although, I mean, we get a nice smashing of a wall. Though they didn't have him smash the central column, they had him smash just the wall.
Mhm.
Which to me, it's like, you're already smashing stuff. You might as well have him do the big event. But, everyone has to make their decisions on this. But, we see that he, I'm trying to remember here. He gets help escaping from this one character who calls himself Houdini, who also had helped the other girl escape earlier.
Mhm.
It was interesting just in the sense that, they have this character with a very interesting and very useful skill set, but we never really get his backstory. And that's always, I think that's like one of the real disappointments about this show is that they will introduce interesting characters, but we don't really get the backstory.
Well, yeah, because most of the time, I mean, with the rare occasions of people who return, I mean, most of the characters we get them, once in one episode, and then they're gone.
Yeah, but anyway, so David comes across the MK Ultra experiment. He throws a fit, which leads to the Hulk out, which leads because, of course, the doctor who has these other attendants who used to be patients, basically go after David. And what I liked about this is there's this great scene here where David is shouting where he growls as the Hulk at the patients, and you get this almost slapstick, but I think very important scene where basically he yells and you see the wind machines
Mm-hmm.
turn on the patients, where you see everyone's hair is messed up. You see the physicality, the superhuman physicality of the Hulk, which is something I think more often than not has gotten overlooked on this show.
Well, I think they're giving Lou Ferrigno a little more to do, like last episode with the whole bowling alley thing, and then this whole thing with all the interactions with the patients.
Yeah, and of course that worked out nicely. And essentially, what happens is David had run out with the video cassette, the very inflammatory video cassette. He hid it, and they can't find it. And then one of the patients finds it. And when our female doctor, our Dr. Joyce Hill, confronts our evil doctor, he is actually very blasé, very matter of fact about everything, and basically says, yes, I have been experimenting on the patients. Mm-hmm. And he says, and look, but he makes this really valid argument. She's like, look, these patients aren't lobotomy victims. Mm-mm. Which is a very important point to make, that these aren't lobotomies he's giving them, because lobotomies were just falling out of favor at this point in psychosurgery. And he's saying that there is this thing that he's doing, and we do see the very legitimate results with Kathy Allen, mm-hmm. where she goes from being essentially this barbarous, inarticulate monster to being, just a decent wife and mother again. And although Dr. Joyce Hill does seem to go along with it when he makes the pitch, and of course, again, the doctor had made the same pitch to David, but David isn't going to go along with it, mm-hmm. Which leads to David being attacked. Dr. Hill basically says, yes, I'm going to go along with it, but then we very quickly realize she's not. Which I think makes for this, when you look at it with modern eyes, you can definitely see this argument being made about a woman in a workplace who recognizes her vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And David Balin here, as a white male, and as, for what it's worth, the smartest man in the room, does not see his vulnerability. Takes a stance that leads to, basically him nearly going on the table, mm-hmm. Himself. And, it's an interesting and very insightful view to how people approach problems, and how the systematic sexism of most of American culture had informed this woman, this doctor in this situation, that, I get what he's saying, and I'm not going to call him out on it, because I do recognize my own both physical, legal, and emotional limitations in this scene. Mm-hmm. That if I do act out, people are going to call me a crazy female doctor who didn't know her place. If I go to the police, they're likely to dismiss me because the other doctor is older and more established. So she is threading this needle. She has a trusted orderly that she gives the tape to help facilitate bringing down the evil doctor.
We'll see. No matter her reasons, I think that would have been the smart play if David had just mm-hmm. told the doctor, "Oh yeah, it's all cool. I understand." And then the minute he was out of the room, he could always leave and go contact the police. But the only thing I was thinking, maybe David was just worried that if the doctor didn't trust him, 2 seconds out after he's out that door, the doctor could have burned all those tapes and there'd be no evidence.
Yeah, except and that's a fair cop. Mm-hmm. Although I think that the doctor was far too much in supervillain mode to think that way. Mm-hmm. I think the doctor was very much in this. I'm the one who understands what we're doing. We're moving mm-hmm. we're moving science forward. Yes, someone may use this knowledge for evil because it's basically an MK Ultra program that I'm doing without a freaking grant. Even I'm just experimenting on people for my own amusement.
Okay, here's the big question I had.
Mhm.
Okay, the experiments the doctor was doing, were they immoral? Of course. Were they irresponsible? Absolutely. I mean, they were wrong on all levels. But what do they charge you with if you're doing something like that?
Oh, illegal experimentation, illegal human experiment. It's actually there are codes against this.
Okay.
There are very strong, because essentially you can't do surgery on someone, and this was presented as a surgical procedure. You can't do surgery on someone without their consent.
Yes.
So it is, and if you are a mentally ill person, you do not have the ability to actively consent. Now, of course, so what happens next is, of course, because the doctor plays along, Dr. Hill plays along, and then with the one orderly she does trust, the one attendant she does trust, she gives him the tape with the idea that he is going to basically, alert Jack McGee, which again is this thing that I think, like, it was so. This is exactly where you needed a Jack McGee. And for what it's worth, here's what I'm going to tell you. This would have been a great scene to write for Bill Bixby. This idea that so let's say he says, "Oh, no, it's okay. I'm not going to cause you a problem. I understand where you're coming from. I'm just the attendant. I'm not here to cause no trouble. I'm just here to do the Super Bowl shuffle." Have him walk away, and then have him reach out to Jack.
Yes.
That would have been amazing. They didn't do this for probably a billion reasons. Not the least of which, maybe they did want to have the Joanna Miles character here, the Dr. Joyce Hill character here, to serve as a female protagonist in the episode.
Yeah, and I mean, instead of her being in danger, if they would have brought McGee and, he could have investigated, the doctor could have got wise, and he could have locked him up just like he locked David up, and then, David would have been all guilty and feel like he had to break Jack out of there without Jack knowing who he is.
Yeah, it would. Honestly, there's a lot of other stories you could have told in this story, but I do think the story works just as it is.
Yeah, it works, but you could have made this like another big 2-part Jack McGee episode.
Oh yeah. I mean, without a doubt, they could. I think they try to. They do the 2-part episodes every so often. Of course, the first, the pilot was a 2-parter, and then the second episode was also a 2-parter.
Later on, I know there's at least like 2 or 3 2-parters, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always you want to tell a lot more story than you often get to tell in a 1-hour episode. And it's one of these catch-22s, is that as you have a more popular episode, a more popular show, the network at this time would have given you more commercials to show during it because they make more money off of it.
Oh yeah.
So the more popular your show was, the less time you had to tell your story. So that's frustrating. Moving right along. Essentially what happens, David, once David confronts the doctor, he gets drugged up. Dr. Hill, played by Joanna Miles again, she's trying to be empathetic to him. She's trying to understand what's going on. But what I really liked about this is when we get do we get one Hulk out? Or do we get 2?
What?
Did we get one Hulk out? Actually, did we get 2 Hulk outs or 3 in this?
We got 2 Hulk outs. Yeah, no. We got the first Hulk out where the Hulk just makes it to the gate and then he, changes back. And that
was Houdini helping him.
Yeah.
Like,
when Houdini helps him, he doesn't Hulk out because he's like all like half sedated, so he can change.
That's right. But what I loved about the Houdini scene is they actually, I have to think this was intentional. They put David in the big blue Navy coat. It's not his big pea coat, but it's like really, to me, it was like, oh wait, did they actually find his pea coat? But anyway, so here's what so essentially what happens in the episode is at the end, so Dr. Hill, gives the tape to the orderly she trusts. They reach out to the press, they reach out to the cops. They actually try to move this forward. In the meantime, the evil doctor is going to do the brain surgery on Dr. Hill. And of course that triggers again we get David Banner on hold causes the Hulk. Which is, for what it's worth, it's always such a weird thing when they do have a relatively mundane activity triggering the Hulk. But of course, he becomes the Hulk. He frees the girl. He, puts the evil doctor into a situation where he's most likely to get arrested. And that's where we find ourselves. The one thing that really bugged me about this episode is we do get this coda at the end. Because they bring back the actress of what was her name? Sienna Barbara Allen. They bring her back with the idea that, okay, now she's cured. And this is what was weird. So they initially presented as she has this violent aggressiveness, which the doctor was able to cure. And what I thought was very interesting is that you have this kind of circular addressing of issues. So we start with Haunted, where a quick bout of Hulk therapy ends the dependence on the fictional spiritual creature or sibling. We move on to No Escape, where we are rejecting the Hulk therapy argument and suggesting that surgery to remove the brain tumor is acceptable to solve this case. And then we get to this final episode in this run, this final psychological episode, where it is a situation where everyone's being treated in this hospital. How they're being treated is arguably in line with the suggestions of what we saw in No Escape, in the idea that it's a physical problem with the brain that once corrected, people are healed. But then we get this very interesting coda at the end, where basically the woman we see at the very beginning, who goes from crazy to sane, like magically, she comes back. They make the point that they reversed whatever it is the doctor did. I didn't like that because it did seem a little cliche to say that they reversed it. But again, they come in now with this idea: you're going to control your emotions, you're going to control where you are, and it's going to take years of talk therapy to achieve this. So it's this. So whereas No Escape was maybe a redress to the ease with which they cured mental illness in Haunted, this is a redress of even the argument that you might actually be able to cure mental illness by simply having a surgery. So that mental illness question within the Hulk canon at this moment is pretty strong. Like I said, I didn't like them saying that Kathy Allen had her procedure reversed, because if they don't even understand what the procedure is, how they're reversing it, and there's a lot of weird questions going on in that scene. But basically, the kid survive. The woman comes back. She is healthy now. They can, David is told, she's going to need, because this is before HIPAA, so, she's going to need prolonged therapy, but prolonged therapy is better than just not having a choice. Because even though this miracle cure could end the madness, it robbed people of their free will. And of course, that is an important aspect of a well-balanced life, is having free will.
But yeah, the other thing I can think of about, you said that them not understanding the procedure and being able to reverse it, since the doctor was recording other parts and he thought this was going to be a big boon for humanity, or himself at least, I would think maybe the doctor was videotaping every segment of the treatment, beginning with the actual operation. He might have actually, explained it on camera, actually taped the surgery itself.
Yeah, well, just reversing the surgery isn't as problematic to me as the fact that they had a cured patient. And exactly how they're determining her illness is very strange. It doesn't seem like, beyond just the idea that they needed the plot devices. Oh yes, well all of the animals have been cured, so
Yeah,
we're back
well,
to breakfast.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of that 70s trope where, everything's all right at the end of the episode, but I just saw it as maybe she saw at she went through the procedure, she saw and felt what self-control felt like, so it kind of, even after the procedure was reversed, it kind of helped her along the way, maybe sped up her recovery.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I think that's what the strongest argument is that, she still is mentally taken out of the moment from when she first went to the doctors, but she can reconnect with the moment.
She was actually it was easier because she was actually shown the destination and she was there. So
Exactly. And for what it's worth, and it does, and this is the thing, is the doctor says at the very end of the episode, it's going to take a while. And she basically says, that cure was great, but it wasn't a cure. It's like that this is what the cure is. It's a long, arduous process of work. Not, I think that's a nice aspect of it. It's as moral thoughts to end on an episode go. I thought that was pretty good, because it is also one that tells David there is not going to be an easy out for him in the Hulk. That he's only going to control the Hulk through a lifetime of work, which is less than cool. Okay. Anything else you want to say about this episode, Phil?
No, I thought it was pretty good. I was just gonna say, the doctor almost gave him a cure, but he was gonna have basically David sedated most of his life, so but he wouldn't have hulked out.
That's an interest, and like, to me, that's the most interesting aspect of this. That is this unexamined aspect of it. First off, was David there to search for a cure, or was he not? We don't get an answer on that. The second question is would this have cured David? Would this have put him in a spot where he could, as the doctor said, been a functional member of the staff, wasn't a lobotomy patient, but that he would also be under control. He would lose his free will. Now, we know from the Mystery Man episode that the hulking out can cure, neurological damage as well. The healing factor doesn't just equate to the body; it also equates to the mind. To that extent, it's a nice thing, but it does come down as to a complex question about would this have cured David Banner had he gone through it, and if it had cured David Banner, what would that have meant for David Banner? Would he have been, in this kind of half obedient state? If he had ever had another hulking experience, would that have corrected him? It's hard to say. Okay. All in all, I liked this episode. I really did. I really liked what it brought to the table. I wish we had had a little more exploration of the ethics of mental illness and treatment.
Yes.
Because, for what it's worth, nothing the doctor was doing was wrong until he told the other patient to kill this patient. Until he tested the boundaries of his procedure, everything was working fine.
And even then, I mean, you could even argue, I mean, yes, it was immoral, but the gun wasn't even loaded.
Yeah, but it's this idea that I'm pushing someone to the point where they will pick up a gun and kill a man. Or kill a woman.
Yeah, but I mean, we didn't see any instance of him actually actively sending anyone out to actually hurt someone. He tested them in a horrible way, but once again, no one got shot, no one got killed, no
But
one
you-
got
but-
injured.
But I think that's what the Nobel analogy that he gives when he's talking to David is meant to imply. That Nobel did not intend for his explosive to cause millions of people to lose their lives. He intended it as a useful tool and a grand discovery. But then, of course, as soon as he puts it out there, people are going to use it for evil. And
Yes.
likewise, the fact that this doctor had cracked the MK Ultra code so that you could now have an army of unquestioning assassins. That's a problem. That's a problem for everybody. That's why everyone freaks out at this. That's why David says this is not a good thing. You can't do this. This is why the other doctor, even though she at first says, "Oh, it's fine," they do give this effort that she does then break away from what the doctor wants. Because it is a scary idea. It is this idea of loss of self. And as I've always said, the most scary aspect of life is the idea of loss of self. And to tie it back into the Hulk, I think that's what is most scary for David Banner about the Hulk, is this idea of the loss of self. The idea that he may wake up and he's in tattered clothing and he really has very limited knowledge of what happened before he hulked out. He might have, had a wild night with some woman, or he might have accidentally killed some women. He doesn't know until he does the research. So it would have been nice if he could have been cured, but then he also probably would have been turned into an MK Ultra assassin, which, is a nice little Elseworld premise, is this idea of the Hulk as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Not David Banner, but just the Hulk as this mind-controlled beast that gets sent out by S.H.I.E.L.D. Okay. So this has been more than enough for one episode, Phil. I hope I have not been too rambling. I've not gotten a decent night's sleep this whole week, so it's like I'm looking forward to that tonight.
Tell me
Phil,
about it.
I know you're. Phil, I don't know how you do half the stuff you do. You do like twice as many pods, read twice as many books, work twice as many hours, and yet somehow you are always coming off smelling like a rose. Phil, how can they reach you to compliment you on your insight and wherewithal in the podcasting community?
If you want to talk to me about anything Marvel or DC, you can always email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am at nightwingpdp, where probably be live tweeting all the DC shows. And just check out all my stuff at philparrish.wordpress.com.
And of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And of course, just tweet at me on the Twitters at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the two E's in the middle for quality. Thank you for hulking out with us, ladies and gentlemen. Please hulk out with us again next week. Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.